Welcome to Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, the podcast where ghost stories aren't just campfire tales, they're family tradition. I'm Heather Perrin, author, lover of haunted history, believer in the unexplained, and your host for this storytelling journey into eerie folklore, fictional frights, and true paranormal encounters from around the United States. Each week, I'll be sharing tales that are a little strange, a little spine-tingling, and maybe, just maybe, true. So grab a mason jar of sweet tea, pull up a chair, and settle in. Because here on Mammal's Front Porch, we believe the veil is just a little thinner when the sun goes down, and the stories, well, they have a way of finding you. Welcome to our first official podcast. I'm Heather, and I'm so glad to have you here. I thought we would kick off our first season with 2 episodes based in my favorite place in the entire world, the Smoky Mountains. And both episodes are being recorded right here in the Smoky Mountains. I mean, what better way to kick off our official season of the podcast than to record on location. In this first episode, we're going to visit 3 different locations: the Greenbrier Restaurant, Roaring Fork Motor Trail, and my personal favorite, Cades Cove. So grab a drink, maybe a snack, and get ready to hear some history and spooky stories. The Greenbrier Restaurant sits tucked away in the wooded hills just outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Today, it's known for its upscale dining, craft cocktails, and romantic atmosphere. But the building itself has a much older and darker history, one that locals and visitors alike haven't forgotten. Long before it became a restaurant, this mountain retreat was a secluded lodge that offered both comfort and quiet. Built in 1939, the original Greenbrier Lodge was a place of rustic elegance set back from the bustle of town and surrounded by dense forest. Guests would come for the hunting, for the solitude, or simply to enjoy a bit of mountain luxury in the early days of Gatlinburg's tourism boom. The property was originally owned by Blanche Moffett, and it quickly became a destination for those seeking peace in the Smoky Mountains. It even boasted Gatlinburg's very first concrete swimming pool, a rare attraction for the area at that time. Over the decades, the lodge shifted hands and purposes. In 1980, Dean and Barbara Hayden purchased it and began the transformation into the fine dining establishment that still bears the Greenbrier name. Their family continues to operate the restaurant to this day. But ask anyone who's worked there or anyone who's dug a little into the building's past, and they'll tell you the same thing. The Greenbrier is haunted. And at the center of nearly every ghost story told, there's a woman named Lydia. The legend of Lydia is both heartbreaking and unsettling. It's said that Lydia was a young woman who planned to be married at the lodge in the 1940s. She had fallen deeply in love with a man, and the wedding was meant to be a celebration of that love. On the day of the ceremony, dressed in her gown and ready to begin a new life, Lydia waited. Her groom, however, never arrived. No one knew exactly what had happened. Some said he ran off. Others whispered about a tragic accident. But the version of the story that has endured, the one that's told most often, is that her fiancé was found days later, mauled by a mountain lion, deep in the woods. Believing she had been abandoned, Lydia returned to her room on the second floor of the lodge, grief-stricken and inconsolable. She tied a rope around one of the large wooden beams in the ceiling and hanged herself, still dressed in her wedding gown. Her body was discovered soon thereafter. Since that day, strange occurrences have been reported at the Greenbrier, and many believe Lydia's spirit never left. The most consistent reports come from the stairwell and the upstairs landing near where Lydia died. Numerous guests and employees have described seeing a pale woman in white at the top of the stairs, always fleeting, always still, and always gone when they look again. There's no physical evidence, no trace of a person, no footsteps, just a presence that lingers. People also report feeling sudden drops in temperature when passing that spot. A few have said that they felt an overwhelming sense of sadness, like walking through a cloud of grief. One guest claimed she saw Lydia reflected in a hallway mirror, only to turn around and find that there was no one there. The paranormal activity isn't limited to sightings. In the kitchen, staff members have watched items fall from shelves or get tossed without any explanation. Spices fly, utensils clatter to the floor, and cold spots come and go as if someone invisible were moving through the room. One story involves a woman using the restroom who heard someone flush the toilet in the next stall. When she stepped out, she realized that she was completely alone. No one else had entered, and the doors hadn't moved. The toilets, like many in the restaurant, are manual, meaning they don't flush on their own. And then there's the beam. A large wooden support beam, believed to be the one Lydia used to end her life, still hangs above what is now the bar area. Some guests have commented on how uncomfortable it feels to stand beneath it, though they often don't know the history. Paranormal investigators who visited the Greenbrier say the beam holds a kind of energy, dense, emotional, sometimes even angry. Psychics have reported that Lydia doesn't appreciate her story being put on display. Others say she just wants to be remembered. There's one especially unsettling tale from a former caretaker of the property, long before it was turned into a restaurant. He claimed he would often hear a woman whispering at night, always the same phrase, "Mark my grave." It happened over and over again. Finally, not knowing what else to do, he placed a small wooden marker near a spot on the grounds that felt somehow different. After that, the whisper stopped. Over the years, several paranormal research teams have conducted investigations at the Greenbrier. They've captured photographs with orbs, unexplained flashes of light, and what appear to be shadow figures lingering in doorways or along the hall. During EVP or electronic voice phenomena sessions, investigators have recorded faint voices, mostly female, and in one clip, a voice answered the question, "Are you still waiting?" with a soft, nearly inaudible response. "He's gone." Others have captured whispers of "don't touch it" or "get out," especially near the beam above the bar. One group even claimed to hear laughter, a light, almost playful giggle from an unseen presence. Despite all of this, there's no indication that Lydia is an evil spirit. If anything, she seems heartbroken, caught in a moment that never ended. Guests who are sensitive to spiritual energy describe her presence as sad, and still. She's not trying to frighten people, she's simply just there. And yet her legend continues to evolve. Some storytellers add a supernatural twist. They say Lydia's spirit was so filled with grief and rage that she somehow became the mountain lion that killed her fiancé. That's a stretch, perhaps, but Appalachian folklore is filled with tales of shape-shifting spirits, vengeful ghosts, and sorrow that takes on animal form. Whether taken literally or metaphorically, it adds an eerie dimension to the story. What if the tragedy wasn't abandonment, but revenge? What if Lydia didn't just die, she changed? Today, the Greenbrier restaurant leans into its haunted history, though tastefully so. One of the most popular desserts is called Lydia's Chocolate Suicide 4-2. There's even a signature cocktail named the Lydia. For some, it's a playful nod to the legend. For others, it feels a little too close to home. Staff members have differing opinions. Some say they've never seen or felt anything unusual. Others have stories they won't share unless you catch them in the right mood after the dinner rush, when the dining room is quiet and the lights are low. One server leaves a single rose on the stairs every Valentine's Day, just in case. The building itself remains beautiful. Warm lighting, vintage decor, dark wood beams, and the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. It's easy to forget where you are, but if you sit still for just a moment and let the room quiet down, you might feel it. A brush of cold air on the back of your neck, the faint scent of roses, though none are nearby, a flash of light at the top of the stairs. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the Greenbrier holds its history close, and the story of Lydia continues, one step, one whisper, one quiet moment at a time. Maybe it's just a legend, or maybe she really is still there, waiting in her wedding dress for a future that never came. Now let's look at our second location of the day. Just outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, yet again, winding through dense forest and beside cold mountain streams lies the Roaring Fork Motor Trail, a narrow scenic loop that cuts through one of the most historic and atmospheric parts of the Smoky Mountains. Today, it is a one-way driving trail popular for its waterfalls, hiking access, and preserved log cabins. But long before it became part of the national park, Roaring Fork was home to a small, tight-knit Appalachian community. Settlers began living in the area in the early 1800s. Families like the Bales, the Ogles, the Reagans, and the Clabos built cabins and carved out a life in the rugged mountain hollers. They farmed corn, raised livestock, and lived off the land with churches and gristmills serving as the heart of their remote society. Life in Roaring Fork was difficult, but steady. Isolated, yes, but full of tradition, faith, and family. As the idea of a national park began to take shape, these communities were slowly pushed out. Many homes were dismantled or abandoned. What remains today are a few preserved structures, cabins, barns, and mills scattered through the forest like quiet reminders of the people who once lived there. When the park was officially established in 1934, Roaring Fork became part of it, but the echoes of the community never fully left. And according to legend, neither did Lucy. Lucy is known today as one of the Smoky Mountains' most famous ghost stories. A spirit said to wander the Roaring Fork Motor Trail, appearing to drivers or hikers before vanishing without a trace. Her story has been passed down for generations, and while details change slightly depending on who tells it, the heart of the legend always remains the same. And if you remember, I have done a very short story on this over on TikTok. Sometime in the early 1900s, when Roaring Fork was still a living community, Lucy was a young woman who died tragically in a cabin fire. It was winter, and the fire tore through her family's home during the night. Some versions say she tried to escape and died just outside the cabin. Others say she never made it out at all. Either way, the event left a mark on the land, and some say on time itself. Years later, long after the fire and long after Lucy had supposedly passed, a man riding through the area came across a barefoot young woman walking alone along the road near the river. She wore an old-fashioned dress and looked cold and lost. He asked if she needed help. She nodded silently, and he offered her a ride on horseback. To keep her warm, he draped his coat over her shoulders. They rode in silence back toward her home, and when they arrived at the site where her cabin once stood, he helped her down. She thanked him softly and disappeared into the night. The man, smitten by her quiet grace, returned a few days later to speak with her family. He intended to ask permission to court her, but when he arrived, the family looked stunned. Lucy, they told him, had been dead for years. They showed him her grave on a hill near the ruins of the old home. And there, folded neatly on her headstone, was the coat he had given her. Since then, people traveling along Roaring Fork, especially in the colder months, have reported seeing a girl walking the roadside and standing near the tree line. Sometimes she accepts help. Sometimes she disappears the moment you try to speak to her. Most often, she's seen barefoot, silent, and looking just slightly out of place, as if she doesn't quite belong in this time. The National Park officially closes the Roaring Fork Motor Trail during the winter, citing safety concerns like ice and snow on the narrow road. And it is a narrow road. But there are some who believe there's another reason. They say Lucy's spirit is more active during the coldest months, that the quiet emptiness give her room to move, to talk, to appear. Her story is what folklorists call a vanishing hitchhiker tale, one of the most enduring types of ghost legends. But what makes Lucy's story different is how deeply rooted it is in local history. Her family name, sometimes said to be Clabo or Bales, links her directly to real settlers from Roaring Fork. Her cabin may very well have stood where visitors now park to see the old grist mill or hike up to Rainbow Falls. Even now, visitors occasionally report strange encounters on the trail. A figure on the roadside that vanishes when headlights hit it, footsteps behind them while walking through the woods, the sound of soft weeping near a cabin with no one nearby. Some drivers speak of sudden cold spots in their cars, or the feeling of a presence seated behind them in the back seat, just for a moment before it's gone. There's a kind of sorrow tied to Lucy's legend. Unlike any spirits or haunted houses, her presence isn't threatening. She seems lost, or waiting, or maybe just remembering. And that's what gives her story such staying power. It's a story not of vengeance or horror, but of life cut short, a moment frozen in time, and a place that still holds on to its past. Roaring Fork is quiet now, but the land remembers. The trees still grow around old fence posts. The stream still rushes by the remains of cabins and spring houses. And maybe, just maybe, Lucy is still out there, walking the path between what was and what might have been. If you drive the trail on a cold autumn evening and you happen to see a girl on the side of the road with bare feet and a faraway look in her eyes, don't be too quick to dismiss it. She may not need a ride anymore, but she's still walking, still waiting, still remembering. And now for our final location of the episode, and my favorite location in all of the Smoky Mountains. Let's head over to Cades Cove. Cades Cove rests in a broad, fertile valley surrounded on all sides by the towering ridges of the Great Smoky Mountains. At first glance, it feels like a postcard that has come to life. Rolling meadows, log cabins, winding roads, and white church steeples that catch the sunlight just right. But look past the beauty, and the valley tells a deeper, more complicated story. This is a place shaped by generations of hardship, hope, resistance, and loss. And if the stories are to be believed, the spirits of those who once called Cades Cove home never truly left. Long before the first European settlers arrived, the land was home to the Cherokee. They called the valley Siahi, meaning otter place, a name drawn from the abundant river otters in the nearby streams. The Cherokee hunted, fished, and held ceremonies here, and archaeological evidence suggests that they may have used the area seasonally, especially in the warmer months. Though they didn't live permanently in the cove itself, it held cultural and spiritual importance, offering access to game, wild plants, and shelter. The first permanent European American settlers arrived in the early 1820s. Among them were John and Lucretia Oliver, who built a small cabin that still stands today. Life in the cove was not easy. The valley's beauty belied the isolation and labor required to survive here. Settlers cleared land by hand, planted corn, raised livestock, built grist mills, and hunted wild game. By 1850, Cades Cove had grown into a thriving mountain community with over 600 residents. The community was close-knit but self-reliant. Families like the Olivers, the Shields, the Gregorys, the Tiptons, and the Reagans built homesteads, churches, and schoolhouses. 3 churches were eventually constructed in the cove: Primitive Baptist, Missionary Baptist, and Methodist, all of which remain standing today. The structures were simple but filled with life. Sunday sermons, weddings, funerals, revivals that lasted for days. Cades Cove developed into a microcosm of Appalachian mountain life. Its economy revolved around subsistence farming, livestock, and trades. Corn was the primary crop, and nearly every family had a small plot. Wild hogs roamed the forests and were marked by ear-notching to claim ownership. Blacksmith shops, a sawmill, and even an iron forge, built by entrepreneur Daniel Fout in 1827, emerged as the community expanded. Education was valued too. Schools in the cove were simple log buildings that often doubled as churches. Classes were seasonal. Children went when they weren't needed on the farm. One-room schoolhouses like the Cable School became vital gathering spots. By the 1900s, the population began to dwindle. Harsh winters, crop failures, and the draw of city jobs started pulling younger generations away. Then, in the 1920s and 30s, everything changed. The federal government, moving forward with plans to create the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, began purchasing land in and around the cove. Some residents sold willingly. Others resisted fiercely, fighting to keep the land their families had worked for over a century. The government offered lifetime leases to those who stayed. Many of these families lived in the cove until the 1940s and even into the 60s. The Primitive Baptist Church, for instance, continued holding services until 1962. When the last residents left and the park took over management, Cades Cove transitioned from a living community to a preserved ghost of the past. Buildings were maintained, cemeteries cataloged, and the famous one-way loop road was created to guide visitors through the remnants of a bygone world. But not everything left with the last wagon. Today, visitors still come to Cades Cove for its history, its beauty, and its wildlife. But many leave with something else, a story, a strange sensation, a photograph they can't quite explain. The valley, for all its charm, has a haunting reputation, and those who know it well will tell you. If you walk slowly, listen closely, and stay just a little longer than you should, you might encounter something that doesn't quite belong to this world anymore. There are over a dozen cemeteries within and just outside the cove. Family plots, church graveyards, and unmarked burial sites. That alone might explain the atmosphere. Cemeteries are known to hold energy, especially when graves are disturbed or improperly marked. And in a place like Cades Cove, where the dead are sometimes just steps away from the living history buildings, it's not hard to imagine a spirit or two still lingering. One of the most well-known ghost stories is that of the cussing cover, or as some locals call it, the haunted quilt. The story goes like this. Mavis Estep, a woman who lived in the cove, was deeply afraid of storms. She believed she'd been cursed at birth and always said she'd die by lightning. When she grew older and married a man named Basil, she made him promise never to let anyone sleep beneath her favorite handmade quilt if it was on a metal bed frame. After Mavis died, Basil remarried. His new wife dismissed the story as mountain superstition and used the quilt on a metal bed. That night, without warning or storm, a lightning bolt struck the cabin. The bed was scorched. Basil died. The quilt, however, was untouched. The quilt supposedly vanished not long after the funeral, and some say it still carries Mavis's energy. Visitors have claimed to see an old, tattered quilt hanging inside one of the cabins, even when there's nothing there on a return visit. Others report the smell of smoke, charred wood specifically, lingering in cabins that have no fireplaces lit. Then there's the Primitive Baptist Church itself, still standing on its original foundation. It's one of the oldest structures in the cove. Several guests have reported seeing a woman's face in the window or photographs taken inside showing shadowy figures that weren't visible in person. One visitor swore they heard singing old-time hymns like "Shall We Gather at the River," echoing through the church when no one else was around. Paranormal investigators who visited the church have captured EVP recordings of whispered prayers, faint weeping, and in one case, a clear, stern voice saying, "Leave." And I do have my own story from the Primitive Baptist Church. I will share in a Patreon video. So if you are on Patreon, that will be up later today. The old mill, another focal point in the cove, has its own share of reports. Guests have claimed to feel a cold spot just outside the door, or to hear the sound of grinding gears even when the mill isn't operating. One park employee once mentioned locking up the mill at dusk, only to return the next morning and find fresh footprints in the dust leading to the upper loft, an area that had been closed off for months. Then there are the orbs. Hundreds of visitors have captured glowing balls of light in their photos, especially near the cemeteries and old homesteads. While some might dismiss these as dust or camera flare, the consistency and the strange shapes and patterns they sometimes form have led many to believe there's something more. In one photograph, an orb hovers above a child's grave. In another, several drift through the trees near the Tipton place. Even hikers on the trails surrounding Cades Cove, like Rich Mountain Loop or the trail to Abram Falls, have reported shadowy figures in the woods. People walking just ahead who vanish when you turn a corner. Whispers on the wind when the trail is otherwise silent. Some of the most chilling stories come from the park rangers themselves. While most are hesitant to talk openly about ghosts, a few off-duty rangers have shared stories of hearing children laughing in the fields after dark, of lantern lights moving through the trees when no one was out, and of getting the sudden urge to turn around only to find there's nothing there. Cades Cove may not have a single central ghost like Lydia at the Greenbrier or Lucy of Roaring Fork, but it doesn't need one. The entire valley is infused with history, layer upon layer of human experience. Birth, death, joy, and loss all lived here, side by side, and maybe that's why it feels the way it does. The cove isn't haunted by one story. It's haunted by many. And sometimes, history doesn't rest easy. Next week, we'll wrap up our trip to the Smoky Mountains with 3 new locations and maybe some tales from me. Until then, thank you for spending time on the porch with me. If you liked today's episode, be sure to follow the show, leave a review, and tell a friend who loves a good spooky story. You can also find me on Facebook at Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch for more updates, behind-the-scenes fun, and the occasional eerie extra. And if you'd like to support the podcast and get access to bonus content, sneak peeks, and more, come visit me over on Patreon. I'd love to have you join me on the front porch. All of these things will be linked in the show notes. This has been Supernatural Tales from Mammal's Front Porch, and I'm your host, Heather. Keep your porch light on. You never know who or what might stop by.